All right, welcome back. In today's tutorial, we are going to once again take a couple of boring chord progressions like this and give them a dramatic new personality by adding an awesome chord shape known as the suspended or sus chord. They're majestic, they're dramatic, and as always, they are useful in ways that you probably didn't know about. So we'll start with a quick breakdown of what makes sus chords so unique, and then we'll reharmonize two chord progressions, one major and one minor, to see how this simple but powerful chord can add tension, drama, and cinematic value to your music. So without further ado, let's get started. First, let's get better acquainted with our new friend, the sus chord. Sus chords are pretty simple. All right, generally speaking, there are two basic types. If you start with a major or minor triad, doesn't matter which one, and you lower the third scale degree down to the next note in your key, in this case a D natural, you get what is known as a sus2 chord, named because you have replaced the third scale degree with the second scale degree. Likewise, if you take a major or minor triad and you raise the third scale degree up a whole or half step to the next note in your key, you're going to get something called a sus4 chord, named, as you can probably guess, after the fact that you have replaced the third scale degree with the fourth. Now, you can use either type of sus chord nearly anywhere you would like in a chord progression. The easiest strategy is honestly just to take any chord in your progression, shorten the third scale degree in either direction, and just fill that empty space with the fourth or second. The sound that they create is just strikingly beautiful. And I really cannot recommend enough that you take the time to experiment and find different applications that you think sound the coolest. However, to help get you started, there are three specific uses that I can recommend. Strategy number one is to help smooth out the transition between two chords that have no common tones. A common tone, as the name suggests, is a pitch that is shared between two or more chords. For example, C major to F major, both of these chords share a C natural in common. Now, the presence of one or more common tones helps create a smoother transition and a closer tie between your chords. But if two triads don't contain any common tones, for example, from C major to D minor, they can sound a little more disconnected. And if this isn't the sound you're going for, you can actually use sus chords to create a common tone. For example, from C major to D minor, all right? These two chords don't have any notes in common. However, if I take this D minor, I cut it in half, and turn the first half into a D sus4, or I could honestly have done a 2, since the E is there. Either way, we now have three chords. And between C major and D sus4, we have a G natural common. And between D sus4 and D minor, we have an A and a D in common, creating a much smoother transition. This strategy can be used to create much smoother voice leading in a progression that might otherwise feel more disjunct. Now, common strategy number two is to help kickstart your chord progression with a little more emotional tension. Honestly, sus chords are like the kings of drama. They can give your major keys greater feelings of grandeur and majesty, while they can grant your minor keys a deeper feeling of pain and anguish. For example, imagine starting your chord progression with the chords C major to G major. All right, it's simple, it's bright, it's effective, but what if we started with a C sus4 instead? Instantly, more personality, all right? And the same goes for minor keys. A minor to E minor. That's nice. But if you throw in an A sus4, yeah, just instantly better. You don't need a fancy music theory reason like creating new common tones to just start using sus chords. If you like the way they sound, try experimenting by shortening a chord here or there and filling in the space with a sus4 or sus2 version of the same chord. They're beautiful chords and they give your progressions so much more personality. But I did promise three strategies, so let's cover one more, shall we? Using both a sus2 and sus4 chord at the very end of a progression creates something that I like to call a heroic cadence, which is just a super fun way to end any chord progression with a slightly more dramatic flair. And it doesn't have to be in a certain order. We could swap the roles. It creates a slightly different sound, but still that beautiful quality we're looking for. I prefer a 4-2-3, but either order is fine. And when you put it at the end of a chord progression, it just sounds wonderful. So now that we have our three strategies, let's see what kind of impact they can have on a couple of simple chord progressions. First up, as usual, we have our chord progression in the key of C major. Let's give it a quick listen, shall we? Perfect. Simple, functional, a little boring, but let's make it more fun, shall we? All right, so right off the bat, let's make a common tone between our first two chords. I'm gonna shorten the D minor. Honestly, we could shorten either of the chords. Either one would work, but I'm going with D minor because if you have the sus chord on beat 1 of a bar, it's gonna stick out just a little bit more. So to create my sus chord on beat 1, I'm going to fill my gap with a D sus4, and suddenly we have a common tone in our first two bars. Next, I'm noticing between bars 3 and 4, we once again have no common tones. So once again, let's chop the G major in half so that our sus chord can be on beat 1. Then I'm going to identify the third scale degree, which is B. G is the root of our G major, B is the third, D is the fifth, and then I'm going to replace my third with the fourth, so that we have, again, a nice little common tone between our A minor and G major. If I skip ahead, you'll see that I decided to add one more sus chord in bar 6, just because I like the way it sounded, before ending the whole thing with a nice little heroic cadence in bar 8. Put it all together and it gives us a much more majestic sounding chord progression. The same kind of impact works just as well in a minor key. Here, we'll listen to a simple yet functioning chord progression in the key of A minor before hearing what it sounds like with a few sus chords thrown in. You'll notice how they lend a much more dramatic and somber quality to our sound. During the replay, I'll highlight the added chords so that they're easier to notice. Before we move on, I do want to point out one thing. In bar 15, this little reharmonization idea, it's not actually a sus chord. It sounded cool, I threw it in, and to explain what this is, literally, it's just a triad, an E major, and then in the second half, I removed the fifth and threw in the seventh. This is done because the fifth is considered a neutral tone. It's not very important to the chord, and so it can be replaced by the seventh if you want to make sure that you're using just 3 voices. But with that, we've reached the end of another video. I hope you found it helpful. If you are interested in learning even more useful tips, check out my textbook, The Musical Storyteller, a 400 plus page book that teaches everything from writing interesting chord progressions and melodies to orchestrating and arranging for modern ensembles and sound libraries. Digital copies are available on my website, and physical copies are on Amazon. Links are in the description below. I want to thank my wonderful patrons and channel members who make videos like this one possible. I appreciate each of you more than you know. So until next time, keep studying, keep working hard, and keep writing new music, my friends. I will see you in the next video.